Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I have a blessing to give to you before I introduce you to our guests. Today is a special day. It's New Year's Eve, Jubilee, the Culture Matters podcast. We're here to reflect on the past and act into the future. I'm going to share a quote before I introduce you to two very important guests and each other. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Our guests today are brothers of the Culture Matters podcast, brothers in arms. They've both collectively been on the show enough to the point where they could have stock in it. One of our guests, I would challenge you all to listen to the most recent episode they've been on, which is episode 736, season 62. They've been in my life since the very beginning of the show. And that would be founder, leader, steward, guardian, roofing and siding, Robert Frehafer. Our story is unbelievable, truly. Our other guest, Mike Calhoun, founder, son to the Orbit of Board of Advisors. I met on July 4th, 2018, episode 552. Go listen to that. Robert, I met through one of my great friends who, if you listen to the show with regularity, you know Bill Mervin. In a uncomfortable circumstance, and destiny brought us together. Fate led us together. Destiny kept us together. Mike, also introduced to me by a deep friend and provider of value to the Culture Matters podcast, Jeremy Adams, on that day of 2018. I could go on and on and on. Robert Frehafer, you already know Mike. This is just the first time you're meeting him. Mike, Robert Frehafer, the same goes for you. The reason I say that is from a value standpoint and how you live your lives and how much you actually give to other people. It's crazy. Now we're dedicating today to a brother of ours of the Culture Matters podcast who's irreplaceable, John Schwartz, who left us on September 16th, 2014. And he's with us now. And shame on me for taking so long to introduce you guys. Man, Robert, meet Mike, Mike, Robert, and the listeners, pay close attention.
Robert, pleasure to meet you, buddy. Where are you based?
Right outside of Philadelphia, Huntington Valley. How about yourself?
Oh, okay. Yeah, just west of Tampa and Pinellas, over by like Clearwater Beach type of area. Um, we just went through those crazy hurricanes a couple of months ago. It was pretty wild.
Yeah.
But beautiful place. Every once in a while you get wet though.
Yeah, every day for like 15 minutes, right?
You get wet going to the car in the garage. The humidity is so crazy. Like it's like a sprint to see how fast you can beat the humidity before you have to take another shower.
Well, Mike, it is nice to meet you, to be introduced to you. I've listened to some of the podcasts that you've run and I definitely have been positively impacted, not only by your voice, but as well by the message that comes
Thank you,
through.
brother.
And I joke around a little bit. I'm sure you hear it all the time about your voice. You're definitely, a country singer.
Yeah.
And I don't know this one guy's name. I don't know his name, but there's a song. It's called "I Can Only Imagine," and there was a movie behind it. And he was with, I think, Trump on his show, like "You're Fired," maybe like Celebrity Apprentice or something like this. And he's a gigantic guy who wore a trench coat. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yes, I'm looking it up right now.
I swear, if you two were next to each other behind the curtain, I don't know that anybody would be able to tell the difference between your voices. It's very impressive. it's not that I'm sure it's just your voice to you, but to me, it's commanding. It's influential. It seems like, you're the power in the room, and obviously your
Wow.
personality behind it is helpful, right? If you had that voice and you were, stumbling all over the place and,
Mike, was that a heavy burden to bear young?
It was a little comedic. Thank you, Robert. It was a little comedic, honestly, because like my first my first real like entrepreneurial activity was selling gum in middle school. Like I literally was making a ton of money selling gum in sixth grade. We have over here on the beach a very famous um, candy shop called Candy Kitchen, where everything's handmade and people travel like across the state just to, take pictures in front of the wall and stuff. But it was on my way, like I would ride my bicycle up the beach and over the bridge, and I would grab a book bag full of this gum for a nickel a piece and sell it for a quarter all day long. Like it was better than being a drug dealer. The best margins of any business I've ever had, right? So I had like a little bit of understanding of arbitrage, and then I started like a mowing lawns business and whatever. And then somebody goes, "Well, you should get a job." Kids start getting jobs at like the grocery store, bagging, Burger King, McDonald's, whatever. So I get this job at McDonald's, right on the beach, right on Treasure Island. Um, and they put me in the drive-through. So I'm like this skinny kid. I still have a picture of me in my McDonald's outfit. 14 years old, skinny little kid, you know, just doing my best, taking orders, welcome to McDonald's, can I help you? And like I have the voice of a 300-pound black dude, right? That looks like he's like Shaquille O'Neal. You're thinking, is this Shaquille on the other side of the McDonald's order taker menu? Because they're staring into this menu, right? And they'll drive. So, like, say you have a car full of girls, it's the summer, teenage girls, they're in this car. All of a sudden, they could be 18, 19, 20, 21, whatever. And it's like, hello, welcome to McDonald's, can I help you? Whatever. And the whole car just goes off laughing. Oh, all this. And what was really funny is like the Spanish or Hispanic ladies, like or the black ladies just went wild. They love the voice, right? So then they pull around and there's two windows, like to pay and to pick up the food. So like usually I was in the one where you're taking the money. And they get around and they're getting their purse and they're like, "Well, where's the guy that took our order?" I'm like, "Where do you think he is? I'm standing right here." To me, it was so normal, like I don't hear it. To them, when I said, "It's me, I'm standing right here," they would like, "What the?" And it was so dramatic, the contrast, because I was like just this skinny, bony little kid with this voice. And it didn't match at all. Right. And so sometimes it was hilarious. Like I remember once in seventh grade, like the big thing back then was to call a girl. Right. But they're like at that uh, day and time, the phone is on the wall. Right. Or they have the cordless phone at the house. So you're not calling their cell phone. You're literally calling the house. And usually
Oh.
the parent, yeah, because this is way back in the day, bro. These kids aren't running around. This isn't when, the parents maybe didn't even have a cell phone.
I've been there. How old are you? How old are you, Mike?
48.
Yeah, I'll be 48 in May. So
Yeah.
I'm right in line here.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's like you're calling and you have to speak to the parent to get to the kid. So I remember this girl, her name was Natalie. I called, and it wasn't even about the girl. It was about like dudes would talk. Have you talked to her on the phone yet? you didn't want to be a wussy, so you had to figure out how to get the nerve to call the house so that you could get to the girl, so you could tell the guys you called, right, and had a conversation. How long was it? I remember I called this girl. The mom picks up. I said, "Is Natalie there?" "Who is this?" I was like, I'm thinking it's just me, right? "Who is this?" I'm like, "It's Mike Calhoun." She's like, all of a sudden, just drops the phone. Here comes the dad on the phone. "Who the hell is this?" I'm like, "It's Mike. I'm in her class. I was just calling." Like, the guy's like, you're in her class? And then he starts he's like on the fence of, is this guy, well, who is this guy? And I'm like, man, I promise I'm in her class. Like, I was just I mean, it wasn't even, now I'm telling him, it wasn't even that important, man. I was just calling to like say hello. That was it. You know, like I was wondering if he was like trying to, like, why are you really calling? It was the weirdest thing, but it definitely created some interesting moments, and especially the years where it cracked, because it went from regular dude to like a high pitched crack, and it was wild. But I usually use it. I think on the phone, it's very productive, helping guide people, from an advisory standpoint, to at this time and day where I'm like on lots of calls. It is a little bit of a superpower, just creating confidence and helping to guide people with the experience, that we've accumulated over the years. I think it definitely helps create confidence quickly on a call. So
It
sometimes
makes me
you get
think of
blitzed.
like, yeah, well, it makes me think like, did God give you that to say something?
I keep wondering, when I sing in the shower, it's great, but it's when you get like, it doesn't really go up and down. That's the thing. It's not a singing voice.
Well,
It's
maybe that's deep.
it's not. Yeah. Everybody's like, you should be a country singer. It doesn't really go anywhere. It just vibrates well.
See, I get
Yeah.
radio announcer, which I know that's going out of style, right? Podcaster, catching attention, and
Wow.
sports announcer, right? If you're a sports guy, like it's so deep, it's so commanding in that regard.
Unless I could figure out the whole country music thing, you know what I mean? Like, there's this guy who,
I'm not downplaying country music when I say this, but I think there's degrees of truth. Music there's a great course on Peterson Academy on Western music that I just started. I haven't taken the first quiz yet. I'm excited to like learn the value of music. I love music with that like classical music, but I don't know enough about it, where its origins were, what it means. But with respect to the singers of the world,
the
there's
Kane
levels of
Brown guy,
truth.
a
Oh, you
Kane
looked it
Brown
up
guy
already?
has a very deep voice. It's a little more modern, but he does a great job of like not having tons of inflection, and he's a little bit of a slower kind of storyteller type of
Trace
artist, I think.
Atkins, I looked it up too. Trace Atkins is the other guy from that movie that I was talking about, the big guy. That's if you check him out afterwards and listen to his talk, and then you'll know what the world hears you like. I'm sure you hear your recorded stuff, so you know what you sound like too.
So you think I sound like this guy Trace Atkins?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll have to listen
Yo,
to
I
that.
think so. You know what? I looked at the thing and I think that was him. I mean, it was the movie. There might have been a different actor in the movie. Now I don't want to. Yeah, no, that's definitely him. Trace Atkins. You should listen to that guy's
Okay,
voice.
I'll do it. I'll do
Talking,
it.
not really just talking. I don't know what he sounds like singing as much. But I will say that, I did have a very profitable business as well with bubblegum. It was
Yeah.
not, it was a popular brand, but it was not very, it wasn't so unique as yours. It was like Bubblicious, Hubba Bubba. things like that. I would go and lollipops, blow pops. I would go to the grocery store. Mine started in high school, end of middle school, but high school, ninth grade. And it's kind of it's a sucky story to tell. It sucks. But at the end of the day, what the story was is that I would go in and I would wear thermal pants. Like up here in the Northeast, it gets a little chilly during school times.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I put thermals and I tuck them into my socks, and then I would grab bags of like 4 or 8 packs of gum, drop them in my pants. They would slide right down in the thermals, be caught with my sock, and then whole bags of blow pop. So mine was 100% profit. I may have needed to buy something. I may have needed to buy something in and out of the store, but most of the times I was too brazen
You had acquisitions dialed in.
and just and went. But number one, it was stealing, right? Like, and the money never seemed to last ever, right? Like it was gone
Yeah.
immediately. And there was a lot of shame and crap mixed up in it. And
Yeah.
to really wrap the story up, the road that I have to walk away from the Acme grocery store is a dark road, real thin, going down into my neighborhood. And that was the road. Like once you got past that road, you're pretty much home free. Like there's a bunch of
Yeah.
kids around and this and that. One time, I think it was the last time that I did it. I'm walking down and I'm trying to get the stuff out of my pants, like at the same time. So that's really probably, suspect if police would pull you over and you have 10 packs of gum with 4 packs each in your pants. And I'm walking, I'm pulling this stuff out, and bang, I get smashed by a car. My left shoulder
Oh,
hit my gum and stuff. That's funny to me. Goes flying all over the street. I'm like,
wow.
it hit my side. This lady was just driving down, very nice afterwards. Like I was raised by a single mom. She was not around at the time. So the lady like took me to her house in ninth grade. I was like,
I
cleaned
hit
up
this
my
kid and
gum.
he's bleeding bubble gum.
Yo, and I had to, yeah, he's bleeding bubble gum. So I think that was like
Honey,
God
I
has
hit this
to hit
kid. There's
me.
bubble gum everywhere.
Like Verucas. So God has to hit me pretty hard, right? Like to
Yeah.
really make an impact on like, yo, dummy, this isn't what you're supposed to be doing right now.
That's
So
hilarious.
so that was my gum selling days. And the funny thing about the voice that rose up was like my son was, we talk about what we did on the phone, calling on the phone. I get it.
Yeah.
It was so easy. Somebody else could listen in on the other line and all that other stuff. But
Kids have no idea, man. They have no
now they
idea
have
how tough it was.
now they play on like I don't even know what I forget this site that it was that my son was playing on. Probably he's a senior now, so he was probably in seventh grade, sixth grade. And this one kid, his name is Jonathan, and he was like the squeakiest voice, blah blah
Yeah.
blah. And all of a sudden, I'm walking by the office and I hear like, "Hey, Jack," what? I'm like, "Yo, who?" To my wife, Melissa, I was like, "Who is he playing this game with?" Because we were a little bit
Yeah.
over the top, like
Yeah.
the online, don't talk to strangers.
Yeah.
And she's like, "That's Jonathan." And then it killed me every time I heard him talking. It was like, I think it's deeper than yours. It is like
Wow.
it's deep. But yes, it's just funny stuff. But Jay, I gotta ask, what made that quote for today? When you bring up quotes like this, I wonder, all right, you're having me and Mike meet each other, which is really awesome, and I'm excited and glad to be part of it. And then you bring up a quote like that. I'm curious, what was the driver today?
So it says here that at the height of his agony, at the very moment when most victims of crucifixion might scream out in fury with a curse, Christ prayed for forgiveness for his tormentors. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Why would he do that? And the reason you guys are the guys that I would want to ask this to, based on how you live your lives.
I uh I appreciate that. That's a
To me, as a person
big
that's
compliment.
lost in a dark room looking for light, This is the most impactful thing that stood out for me from the Bible so far. You know, and people are constantly sending me Bible. They're giving me Bibles. They're sending me things. Clearly something's going on. I constantly getting invited to churches. And I love it. I'll go. Eric Guy's going to be on at 2 p.m. Robert, you're more than welcome to stay and pop on that. You know, I just went to church twice with him, and it's really amazing. It was amazing. I loved it. But that's when I was thinking about the quote that I would want to say at the beginning of the show. Mike, you know Robert, yet this is the first time you're meeting him, but he is his piety has impacted my family's life. So he's someone I lean on in these conversations since getting to know you more and more and more. I know this is true to you. So yeah, I don't know.
Robert,
I just
were
felt
you
it.
just looking up that scripture?
I was looking things
I
up because I
wasn't
was
looking up that
curious.
particular one. I was looking up. There's one in the New Testament that talks about because Jay said it's like I'm in a dark room and I'm groping. And there's one in the New Testament, and I'm not the best with the address of the verses, but there's one that, and I even looked it up, and I couldn't find it exactly because I wasn't putting the right words in. But basically, it's saying that like before knowing Christ, we're like walking around, like feeling our way through this world in this dark world. So when you said that, Jay, it brought that context to my mind for sure. That
Wow.
because we are, that's what the word tells us is that we're blind. We're blind, we're deceived. Our eyes are covered, our ears are shut to the truth. And I really, that gets me emotional to hear that so many people are sending you Bible verses, sending you Bibles, right? Like now, either A, you're like way out and you need to like change what you're doing. And they're like, bro, you need a guidebook. Or B, which I think that I would subscribe to, is that people love you and they want you to know the truth and to be in a relationship with the Lord, right? Because they love you and they care
Yeah,
about you.
so I think I know what you're talking about. So to the to the verse that you were talking about, then Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And they parted his raiment and cast lots. So as he's approaching the moment where he had completed what he came here for, because Christ says, "I did not come to save you from the law, but to fulfill it." Meaning he came to fulfill scripture and prophecy. A third of the Bible is actually prophecy. And most of the Bible points to Christ, whether before or after. And so the most people believe in the person of Christ and not the payment of Christ. And as he is approaching that point where he says, "It is finished," the representation here where it says, then, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." It is the illustration of Christ's request for grace for us, where we are saved through grace and not works. And a lot of the religions are very works based, in the sense of think it's Catholicism. You gotta, do penance and all. It's very works based relevance for um, being saved, right? So this is like almost kind of like that precursor or prefix to that request, making the request and then completing the work with the final statement of, "It is finished." And then when we go back to John, so what you're talking about, where in John 1, where it says, so John 1:3, all things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. in him was life, and the life was the light of men, and the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. So, like, once the sin entered in the very beginning, the light goes out in the sense of his spirit in us, which is why now we are not baptized with water, because after Christ came, the water baptism was a semblance of what was to come now that Christ came and left and gave us the Holy Spirit. That Spirit now creates that baptism, which is why our light, he is the life, as the life was the light of men. That is the restoration of, when they say being born again, putting that light in us, which is what's supposed to shine in the darkness of the world that comprehendeth it not. Does that make sense?
It
Robert?
makes sense. It makes sense to me, yes. But as I listen to it, I'm like, man, like if somebody didn't have a foundation, it would be really hard to wrap not the principle, each individual principle. And obviously you're educated, Mike, so you can speak in volume to these things. But it is it it makes sense, and it's so important, the concept of it, right? Like if okay, we're coming in and we're in a darkness. If we're in sin, we're dead. If we're dead spiritually, and
Mm.
but the part where it says it, and they comprehend it not, right? Like that means that people can't see it, right? And I've been there. Like from my view, I
That's
would,
the definition of being lost and in the dark, right?
yeah.
Well, like, what were you thinking when you were taking the gum? What was
So
I thinking when
so
I was
that here's the challenge.
doing dumb
I
things?
can't claim like, oh, I was ignorant to right and wrong at the time. I knew.
Yeah, I'm not saying that.
Yeah, okay. So what was I? Go ahead. What was the question?
Well, what I want to know? Yeah, what were you? You knew what?
I knew I was doing wrong. It was exciting. I
Yeah,
wanted.
but if it has no okay, so this is what I meant. Yeah, I knew I was doing wrong. It was exciting, but if it doesn't have any meaning, there's no meaning,
Well, it goes back to like what
right?
Adam and Eve is taking a bite of the fruit of the tree of good of uh,
Knowledge of
knowledge,
you.
tree of knowledge, not life, tree of knowledge. So they were taking a bite, and what it was is it was the test. So the devil comes, the serpent comes and says, "Look, lest you surely die." So,
Did God say? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know. Let's see. Like they took the risk almost to see if God was really telling the truth, but the deception was the test. So when they take the test and they find out, well, I didn't die, there is a understanding of, did they physically die or spiritually die? But there is a repercussion, and the repercussion doesn't happen. That repercussion didn't happen right then. They didn't just drop over dead. And he didn't feel the guilt right then because there was a sensation of, well, if I take it and I walk out and I get away with it, like, does anything bad really
Oh, I want
happen?
to add something to that though. He said, I knew it was wrong, let's say, right? Without a belief in God, wrong to who? Oh, wrong to man or like wrong to people I don't respect?
But when you
Well,
haven't done
there's no
deliberate,
wrong without a fear of God.
as a
There's-
kid, when you're not really like deliberate, like you inch up into this realm of awareness, and you're, as a kid, being a bad kid, you're not really making deliberate choices. You're usually there's some sort of line of delineation where he's sitting there stuffing the stuff in his pants, and there's a little bit of the psychology where he's like, am I really gonna feel guilty about this? Am I going to get away with it? Am I feel guilty? Is it really,
And
like,
I subscribe to the mindset that like, oh, it's a corporate. I've heard that. I grew up in it. Like, oh, it's I'm totally fine to steal from corporation. Like
yeah,
they're fine
yeah,
with it. Like
yeah.
crazy.
But then the repercussions slowly creep up on you, whether it's your own guilt or getting caught or both. Everybody circumstantially suffers the consequences differently in a different time and a different format, right? The thing about the light, it's funny you brought that up because I just read John 1 the other day, and I'm like, if there were only one chapter of the Bible that I would ever recommend, if I could just say one chapter, and that's the only one that I could ever use to lay down the business case that Christ is who he said he is and the reason he came, that like John 1 is the read that just lays it on the line where you're like, I mean, it lays it all out there from the beginning to the end to his position in the world. I mean, everything being, created through him, by him. It's a wild chapter that, quite frankly, probably summarizes the entire existence of us and the relationship with him, and how it is designed, right? How it's supposed to play out. It's just a wild chapter. How many verses is it? 51 verses.
Wow. What's the first one?
In the beginning.
Well, yeah.
No, what was it? Yeah, it's in the beginning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in the beginning.
In the
I'm
beginning,
reading the
God
last one real quick. So
was the Word.
he saith unto him, verily, verily, I say unto you, here ye shall see heaven. Oh, hereafter you shall see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. Yeah, it's wildly powerful, especially when you have that like the global knowledge, right, of prophecy, the origination through Genesis all the way through Revelation. Like, it's just such a powerful chapter. Yeah, in the beginning was the Word. So think about this. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. The same was in the beginning with God, and all things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. So later on, it talks about what? Right here it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So it talks about later the Word became flesh, meaning he was born into a physical body. So it's always referring to the Word not only being with God, it was God, he was God, he became flesh, the Word became flesh. Like, Christ is what people have the wrong interpretation of who really Christ is. They think of him as this man and this prophet and this dude that showed up and taught everybody how to be a good person. That's not why he came. He had to come and live a sinless, blameless life in order to be the perfect sacrifice, or it doesn't work. If he wasn't that example, it was obviously we want to live like him because it's a role model, but he didn't come to necessarily just do that. He came to do that so he could die. And if you look back at the design of what covers only the remission of sin, because it's not a perfect sacrifice through blood sacrifice, something has to die in order, in a sense, for us to live. And the only thing that creates death is when you shed blood, right? So if you look at the very beginning, when Christ or Adam and Eve or Cain and Abel, he designed, how do you get right with me? Right? So they sin in the garden, they eat the fruit, they're out of the garden, and he designs how you get right with me using the word remission. That's it's not removal, it's remission. And there is a cycle of creating these sacrifices, which are blood sacrifices, where a life is taken so that a life can be given, but it's only an illustration and pointing to what he has to do ultimately to make things right with us. And it's just that it's a really, like, yeah, I don't know. I'm probably taking over the conversation here, but it's wildly beautiful and complex and powerful. The John 1 is just,
How about the whole story? Let's call it weird a little bit too, right? Like from hearing it and understand, like, okay, you have to kill somebody, you have to kill something, sprinkle its blood around, offer some of it up as a burnt sacrifice as time goes on. And truly, we're in where I live, like we're in a society that's far removed from even killing our own food. I don't know about you, Mike. Jay, I know you pretty well. I can't imagine you going out hunting, gutting the deer, pulling the innards out. But Mike, do you hunt like that? Do you do hunting?
I mean, I hunt for really, really great new citizens within my community. Yes.
So what I'm saying is, like, I haven't hunted like that, but I've had to spill some blood, right? Like with some animals here or there. That is graphic. It's terrible. Like, and they had to take these animals and find the most perfect. It couldn't have a spot on it, no blemishes, and then drain its blood out,
Yep.
use the blood for certain things, do these things. Like, it's weird, but through, like, I would say anybody that's not in faith would look and listen to us like, what the heck? These guys seem like they're like, okay, kind of decently smart. Like, why would they still subscribe to these archaic, ridiculous thoughts? But I can hear it in you, Mike, when you talk about how I just was reading John 1 yeah, not First John, John 1, chapter 1. And I've had that. Sometimes it's a chapter, sometimes it's a verse, sometimes it's like a paragraph. It's like, oh, this is it. Like, this is if you had asked me how many times, probably 50, 100 times I felt that way. But if you ask me right now, which one was it? Like, I have a few that rise up, but it's like goes in waves, right? Like, so it goes away. And I look at that. So when I hear you talk about the word like that, like, I know that faithfulness, that desire, that connection with the Lord through his living word, and through faith, right? So it's faith, right? And Jay is like super duper smart, right? So he can hear all these things. I can hear all these things, but it's that spark of faith, right? The hope in things unseen. So to have that inside, it's like, how do you describe that, right? So it's not only an emotion, right? Because there's spirit in there that is God is giving us this.
But it also defines, it defines that, because the Levites were the priests. So the Jewish, or Israel, was divided into different tribes, and the Levites were one of the tribes, and they were, as the culture was defined, they were assigned as the priests of the culture, right? So the life, so the scripture says, for the life of the flesh is in the blood. So in order to remove the life from the flesh, it has to be blood. So think about it. Think about this. A deliberate removal of life in a timely fashion, like, I guess you could suffocate them or whatever, but like, there has to be proof, and proof is the staining of the blood. So if the life is in the blood needs to come out of the flesh, and the proof of it coming out of the flesh is the stain on the altar, right? So it's like God understands what he created, and he also understands that we are very visual. And I think he's always trying to paint a vivid picture so that you have different levels of individuals in society, right? So that even the most basic of understanding, they're very clear, like, this is how this works. And when things can be very easily manipulated as well. So say you suffocate somebody. Well, did they really suffocate? Who knows? They could have just looked like they did. And then, you pulled it off, you saved your sister, whatever, right? But when the blood is shed and it's all drained out and it's sitting on the altar, there's no real faking that, right? So I think it's a very, God is very vivid and exacting in his design when he creates a framework for, and it's always our issue, and he's coming back, making a way through grace for us to be right with him because we're his creation. See, that's why he talks about allowing the rocks to cry out and praise him as he sits in his realm of heaven. There are creatures that are assigned to basically every moment praise and state, holy, holy, holy is the Lord our God, right? And if we are the only creature designed to make a choice, my dog does not make a choice like to praise God and decide to choose him. We were designed in his image to have a relationship with him and to choose him. I mean, even the angels are designed as his, and to a degree. Let's think of it as a military, right? They're designed in their architecture as service agents and responsibility in the community of heaven, right? They are certain types of citizens in their role in heaven. Like the biggest compliment we can ever, ever, ever give him is to choose him. And like that's the beginning point of the relationship, because he already chose us. He just wants us, because that's the most into, like, there's nothing else in creation that we know of that gets to make that decision, right? Like that's the thing that makes us special. We get to choose him, and because he's already chosen us. And like that's what sets us apart from everything else that's ever created.
If
Thank you.
you're listening to this podcast, share this with someone
And go
who's
read John 1.
and go read John 1.
And for somebody that doesn't know, there's Matthew, Mark, Luke, John in the
You're
New
right.
Testament. Then there's John 1. Then there's First John, Second John, Third John. So it's one of the Gospels. It's the fourth book in the New Testament.
I wrote this down as like a practical takeaway. When we lose faith, we eventually become the tyrants the Romans were to the Jews, to our brothers and sisters.
Say that again.
When we
When
lose
we,
faith, we eventually become the tyrants like the Romans were to the Jews, to our brothers and sisters.
yeah, like like a top-down relationship versus like a shoulder to shoulder, because like there's the faith is a redemptive quality. Um, I can rationalize why I should never talk to plenty of people in my life for all sorts of reasons. What I've done to them, I have shame. What they've done to me, I have rage. Faith, my responsibility to God, my responsibility to His Word puts me in a position to not rationalize, but to move forward, to forgive. That's this is coming from the forgiveness piece. I'm for forgiveness, as like Mike said on the What is Value episode. I'm for forgiveness. Giving is a cup that never runs out. It's un it's and so I think it's a consequence of faith. The
Yeah.
faith, yeah. So that's
Here's
my
the
takeaway from this
Well, let me
conversation.
ask you this though. Is it faith that Jesus was here? Like, do you believe the person existed? Or do you believe in the payment that he made?
There could be a relationship between like like the emphasis on how we live and whatnot. That may have a like if I start living in a way, I'm following all the advice, all the wisdom, all of the energy pushing me in a direction of virtue versus sin. The likelihood of me not eventually believing in the narrative is very low unless I'm false. So I think it's a both like they're kind of like in a loop. I mean, this is
But
a
it's
good
also
a good
it's the greatest deception, which is why there's also the verse that says, "But we did all these things in your name," and he says, but I never knew you."
yeah, I'm in agreement with that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm
But
saying is
I'm
the
for the
person that really
listener, for the
it's the loose
listener, I want to make it clear,
okay,
like
the
the
Luciferian intellect, okay, can lead us to something that isn't what we're talking about, and we're on the same page there.
yeah, yeah.
This is why I say that Peterson's a postmodernist. He's the left hates him for the reasons that the right shouldn't follow him. And I'm a huge student of him, but he's not a theologian. So he's a psychologist. But it's just an example. I'm not attempting to be hard as a pejorative on him, just to use it as a point. It's a good loop for another. But I do think that if you come through, I actually believe it. I'm willing to state it. I'm willing to say it. Going back to the beginning of the conversation, I have a voice. It may not be God given at the degree by which Mike's vocal cords are radiating, but I have a voice that's been given to me, and it's been given to me with a purpose, and that purpose is to say that I accept the challenge of life. I accept the obligations, and I believe. And if I don't admit that I do, then I'm hiding something. So, and that's where, yeah, the faith. Anyway, I got a lot from this conversation. I appreciate the master class. I
I've
challenge the listeners to
probably
follow you guys out
Robert,
and
I'm
get
sorry for
close to
taking
you.
over. I just got on a rant.
Well,
This,
it's been a practice that I've learned from Jay is to listen because truly you don't need to apologize. It's great. It was great. You're saying the things that I would say generally anyway, right? And when I say generally, a couple of things that rise up and you were hitting it hard like, hey, people will look at Christ as like he was a good guy, he's a teacher, but not to look at him for who he was and even to like take that and I believe that you mean it this way but to take that to the next level that he is God, like Christ is God. That's what he was. The word with the word was with God, and the word was God, and the word became flesh, and the word and and dwelt with us. So I say that one part because you didn't say that for the listener, right? You didn't say
Hmm,
that
hmm.
one part is that like hold on, like let's just make sure we take it all the way to that's my faith, right? And
Hmm.
you can correct me
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
don't
no, no,
believe the
no. You're
same, but I
exactly right.
believe
I
that
mean,
you
it says
do.
it right there in the beginning of John.
Yeah.
He was with God and he was
Yeah.
God,
So
right?
so that was the one thing. The other thing that rose up that I would have probably expounded on a little bit was that this concept that, instantly Adam was enthralled with doing what he did, but we don't know how much quicker the guilt came in, how instantaneous or moments or days, but because shortly after God was walking through the garden and was like, "Where are you?" And
Mm,
he's hiding. Why are you hiding? Because I was naked. Who told you you were naked? Right.
mhm,
So he's in his guilt and shame
mhm.
process, right? Generally. So that would be one thing that I would touch on. I would have touched on a
And
little.
if you were there, you would have given him pants with bubble gum in them, and he would
Yeah,
have felt
yeah.
naked.
And,
He would have
and
had
that
plenty to
I
chew
thought
on.
you were I thought you were going to go there at one time because you talked about like the death and when you reel it all the way back and some a lot of that equation and not that it's the part of forgiveness, but ultimately that's when death has entered
Yeah,
in is
correct.
because he had to get animal skin. That's what the God gave him animal skin to give him a covering now that
Hmm.
he knew, right? And that whole thing, that story is I just love the part where it's like, yeah, they had to get him out. There's like this council. It's not a full council. It's in a plural. Like we need to get them out of the garden or they're going to keep eating.
Oh,
And they put a flaming sworded angel spinning
yeah.
around the garden so it doesn't come back. Like it's amazing, right? Like these things get me excited. I like an exciting life. I like an exciting discussion. And I'd like to believe in that and go after that journey, right? And it's a great motivator. I just wrote my 2025 plans. And that's part of my plan is to be more gospel centered in business, right? And more
What's your word
focused
for
on
2025?
excellence. Excellence.